Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The air inside the hospital was thick with noise, mothers crying, nurses calling out names, babies wailing, and the occasional shouting of frustrated patients. But nothing was louder than the sound of Uche's voice as it echoed through the walls of the reception. Amara stood, heavily pregnant, her hands trembling as she tried to hold her swollen belly with one hand and wipe the hot tears streaming down her face with the other. Her wrapper was slightly loose at the waist, and her slippers worn out from walking for hours just to get here. Her voice cracked as she pleaded with the man she once called her husband. Uche, please don't do this. You know this child is yours. You know the truth. But instead of compassion, Uche's eyes burned with wickedness, a mixture of hatred and shameless pride. You must be mad, Amara. You think you can pin this bastard on me? Me? I don't know you. Leave me alone. His voice sliced through the air like a sharp blade, attracting the attention of every single person in that reception. A crowd formed almost immediately, as it often did whenever drama surfaced in public places. Some stared out of curiosity. Others snickered and whispered behind hands. An older woman shook her head disapprovingly. These young girls of today, always trapping men with pregnancies, she muttered loud enough for others to hear. But not everyone was quick to judge. A few sympathetic voices tried to calm the situation. Olga, even if it's not your child, must you disgrace her like this? Look at her condition, a man in faded trousers murmured. But Uche wasn't done. He stepped back dramatically, raising his hands like someone pushing away bad luck. This woman is not my wife. Ask anybody here. I don't know her. She just came to disgrace me. The child isn't mine, and I won't take any responsibility. Let her carry her shame somewhere else. His words struck Amara like bullets, her knees wobbling until she collapsed slowly onto the floor, holding her belly as sobs racked her body. The shame was unbearable, not just the denial but the eyes, the murmurs, the judgment. What neither Uche nor anyone else realized was that just a few meters away, parked quietly under the shade of a large mango tree, was a sleek black Range Rover with tinted windows. Inside sat a man whose expression was stoic, yet his fists clenched tightly on his knees. Mr. Obina, a billionaire known for his private wealth and secret acts of charity, had been quietly watching the entire incident unfold. He hadn't intended to witness such cruelty. He had come to the hospital quietly to check on a ward his foundation was sponsoring, secretly, without public attention. But the moment his eyes caught Amara being humiliated like this, something in him stirred, something deep, painful, and familiar. His jaw tightened, and his brows furrowed as he leaned slightly forward, watching closely. His driver glanced at him through the rear-view mirror, uncertain whether to interrupt, but wisely said nothing. Mr. Obina's breathing became shallow, and he muttered under his breath, "Not again. I've seen this before, not again." The door of the Range Rover remained shut, yet Mr. Obina's mind was already racing. His fingers tapped rhythmically on his knee as flashes from his past flooded his memory. Flashes of his own mother, broken, sitting under the rain with a swollen face and a child on her lap. Him, when he was only a boy. He remembered how his father had publicly denied his mother, shouting those same cruel words, "I don't know you," in front of a judgmental crowd. Obina was barely 10 then, but old enough to remember the pain that never left. It was a wound that money never healed. Now decades later, seeing this woman, a stranger, go through the same public humiliation ignited a fire in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. He gritted his teeth, watching as Amara struggled to stand, one hand on her lower back and the other shielding her tear-stained face from the cruel whispers around her. His lips tightened, and with a cold, sharp voice, he said to his driver, "Find out who she is." Now, as Uche stomped away, brushing past people who stepped aside like he was some villain walking off stage, the billionaire's gaze followed him, but not for long. His focus shifted back to Amara, who now sat crumpled against the wall, her hands trembling, murmuring words that only her broken heart could understand. The crowd slowly began to disperse, their need for entertainment fading now that the main actor had exited. Some shook their heads in fake pity, others still whispered judgments, but a few women hovered close, offering Amara weak comfort, a tissue here, a pat on the back there, but none willing to do more. It was the painful reality of society. Everyone watches, few truly help. Mr. Obina's driver hesitated before asking, "Sir, should I?" But he was cut off mid-sentence. Obina opened the car door himself, stepped out, and adjusted the cuff of his tailored shirt. Heads turned. People stared, confused by the sudden appearance of a man whose very presence radiated wealth and power. The billionaire walked calmly but with purpose, his polished shoes making a soft tap on the dusty tile floor. He approached Amara, without saying a word at first, simply kneeling to her level. His deep voice was soft but firm when he finally spoke. "Madam, are you all right?" She flinched, expecting perhaps another insult. But when her swollen, tear-filled eyes met his, something shifted, both in her and the crowd watching. Silence fell. The man was not like the others. His aura was different, commanding yet gentle. A nurse froze mid-step. A man at the corner gasped slightly. Everyone seemed to hold their breath. Mr. Obina reached into his inner jacket pocket, pulled out a clean white handkerchief, and handed it to her. His eyes never left hers. "Don't be afraid. You're safe now," he said. His words weren't just words. They carried weight, the kind of weight that turns pages in destinies. Long before the broken sobs, the cruel insults, and the humiliation in that hospital, Amara was a woman the community respected. She was known for her resilience, her industrious nature, and her ability to turn almost nothing into something meaningful. Years before marrying Uche, Amara had built a thriving food supply business. Her shop stood proudly by the roadside, a spacious place stacked with bags of rice, gari beans, cartons of noodles, spices, and essential household provisions. Customers flocked there not just for the quality of her goods, but because of the kindness and fairness she extended to everyone. Her smile was infectious, and her hands were quick to assist, whether it was an elderly woman struggling with heavy loads or a struggling student who needed credit until the next allowance came in. Life wasn't easy, but Amara made it beautiful. She wasn't born with a silver spoon, no. Her parents passed early, and she raised herself from the dust of life. From hawking groundnuts at traffic junctions to selling palm oil in tiny bottles, she rose slowly, gathering coins, then naira, until she opened her shop. By the time Uche stumbled into her life, he was a struggling young man, jobless, hopeless, and rejected by friends who could no longer feed him. Amara met him one rainy evening when he sat under the veranda of her shop, hungry and soaked. Driven by compassion, she offered him a plate of food. One conversation led to another, and gradually friendship grew. She helped him draft CVs, gave him small money to survive, and even let him stay in her spare room when he had nowhere else to go. Everyone in the neighborhood admired her generosity. Some whispered that she was foolish for trusting him, but Amara believed in second chances. She believed in love, or so she thought. When Uche finally proposed, Amara accepted without hesitation, ignoring the subtle warnings from friends who noticed red flags she was too blinded to see. At first, marriage felt like a fairy tale, filled with morning laughter, shared dreams, and promises of forever. But slowly, cracks began to show, starting with Uche's family. They came visiting with empty hands but left with loaded bags of foodstuff, always under the pretense of "we are family. You won't ask us to pay, will you?" At first, Amara tolerated it. After all, this was the family of the man she loved. But what started as occasional requests soon became constant demands. If she delayed for a day, they whispered, "So she's already showing her true color." Little did Amara know, this was just the beginning of the storm. It was one of those heavy rainy evenings in Enugu when the skies looked like they were mourning alongside the poor. Amara had just closed her shop for the day when she noticed a figure curled up near the corner of her store's veranda. The man was soaked to the bone, hugging his knees, trembling not just from the cold, but from hunger and exhaustion. His clothes clung to his lean frame like a second skin, and his eyes, though filled with shame, couldn't hide the hollow desperation. Something in Amara's heart tugged. She knew that kind of emptiness. She had worn that look before, years ago, when the world showed her no mercy. Without thinking twice, she unlocked her shop again, went to her small food stove, and dished him a plate of hot rice with vegetable stew from her own meal. As she handed it over, the man hesitated for a moment, as though battling between pride and survival, but hunger won. He devoured the food, tears mixing with raindrops on his cheeks. That was the first conversation they had. His name was Uche. His story was all too common, yet still heartbreaking. A young man with dreams shattered by joblessness, family rejection, and broken promises. He had been searching for jobs for months without success, sleeping anywhere the night found him, surviving on pure water and sympathy. As he ate, he spoke little, but Amara didn't mind. She offered him a warm towel, some clean clothes from her late brother's box, and a dry mat inside the storage room at the back of her shop for the night. By morning, the gratitude in his eyes had softened into something else, admiration, perhaps, or the beginning of hope. Days turned into weeks. Amara allowed him to run minor errands for her, carrying bags of rice, helping customers, cleaning shelves, and in return, she gave him meals and a small allowance to survive. Slowly, Uche began to regain weight, and with it, his smile returned. What started as charity soon blossomed into companionship. Uche was charming when he wanted to be, attentive, helpful, and always quick with sweet words that stroked Amara's heart. They shared conversations that went into the night about their dreams, their past struggles, and the futures they wished for. He spoke about wanting to be a responsible man, a good husband someday, and build something meaningful. For a woman who had spent years battling life alone, those words sank deep. The neighborhood began to notice their closeness. Some praised her kindness, others whispered warnings that a man too comfortable under a woman's roof might one day show his true colors. But Amara silenced the doubts in her heart. She had seen the worst of life and believed that maybe this was her reward, finding love in unexpected places. So when Uche eventually knelt, not with a ring, but with shaking hands and watery eyes, and asked her to be his wife, she smiled through her tears and said yes. Little did she know, that smile would soon fade into something darker. Amara's first real encounter with Uche's family came shortly after their simple, modest wedding. The ceremony was held under a small canopy outside her shop. Nothing extravagant, just a few friends, some neighbors, and a rented sound system. Uche's family arrived dressed in second-hand lace fabrics, with plastic smiles that seemed a little too forced. His mother, Mama Uche, was a sharp-tongued woman with eyes that scanned everything like a tax collector. The sisters Ngozi and Chidinma were no different, young women who masked their entitlement behind loud laughter and fake compliments. And then there was his younger brother, Somadina, a lazy, arrogant boy in his early 20s who walked around with sagging trousers, acting like the world owed him everything. They acted warm, hugging Amara, calling her our wife, while whispering side comments to each other about the food, the drinks, and whether there would be souvenirs. The first week of marriage exposed the first crack. Mama Uche showed up unannounced one morning with 2 large sacks. Without greeting properly, she walked straight into the shop and began pointing. Amara, pack 1 bag of rice, 3 cartons of noodles, a keg of vegetable oil, and don't forget crayfish. Uche is our son, and what belongs to him belongs to us, she declared, laughing like it was a joke. But her eyes held no humor. Amara stood frozen for a moment, stunned by the audacity. She hadn't expected this level of entitlement so soon. But out of respect and the euphoria of being newly married, she packed the items without argument, even though it cut deep into her shop stock. Uche stood quietly by, saying nothing, offering a weak smile that barely masked his discomfort, or was it silent approval? That day set the tone. Soon, the sisters followed suit. Ngozi would come by for cooking gas money. Chidinma would demand toiletries, and sometimes borrow Amara's clothes without returning them. So Medina, the jobless brother, became the worst, always coming around, eating, collecting money for phone recharge, and even asking for transport to visit friends. Each time Amara tried to speak to Uche about it, he shrugged, saying, "It's family, Amara. Don't make it an issue." But it was an issue. Slowly, her shop began to suffer. Stocks ran low. Some customers were turned away because there was nothing left to sell. Her profit dwindled, while Uche's family drained her like leeches. Yet she swallowed it all. The disrespect, the insults masked as jokes, the silent theft, convincing herself that this was the price of marriage. If only she had known that the worst was yet to come. It didn't take long before what started as occasional requests transformed into outright demands. Mama Uche became bold enough to walk into the shop, point at anything she wanted, and leave without as much as a thank you. "We are family. You can't possibly be asking me for money," she would scoff whenever Amara hinted at payment. The sisters took after their mother, loud, entitled, and manipulative. They would come in groups, take drinks from the fridge, pick bags of flour, tins of milk, and biscuits, stuffing them into shopping bags like it was their God-given right. When Amara tried to set boundaries, explaining politely that the business needed money to restock, they rolled their eyes. "So, you mean to say you don't trust your husband's family? Are you calling us beggars now?" Ngozi snapped one afternoon, throwing a pack of Indomie into her bag regardless. Amara's breaking point came the day Mama Uche demanded that she pay Somedina's university tuition fees. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. "Your husband doesn't have the money yet. But you, Amara, you have a shop. You've been hiding money. Pay for your brother-in-law to go to school. It's your duty as a good wife," Mama Uche said, her voice sharp, her eyes filled with accusation. Amara swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "Mana, I don't have that kind of money right now. Business has been slow," she replied, her voice soft but firm. That simple truth ignited the fire. Mama Uche gasped dramatically, as if Amara had insulted her entire generation. "So that's it. You've been pretending. You've been wicked all along. You lied to us. You want to see Somedina become a dropout because you hate this family," she screamed, drawing the attention of neighbors who peeked through their windows. That day marked the turning point. From that moment on, Amara was no longer seen as the beloved wife, but as an enemy to the family. The warm greeting stopped. Instead, the whispers began. "She's wicked. She's selfish. She has bewitched our brother." Even Uche, the man who once smiled at her with adoration, began changing. His voice grew colder. His eyes avoided hers. Conversations became arguments. Arguments became silence. No matter how much Amara tried to explain, Uche no longer listened. His mother and sisters fed him daily doses of poison, lies, manipulation, and accusations. And like a puppet, he danced to their tune, slowly transforming from the man she once loved into a stranger she could barely recognize. Amara stood helpless, watching the family she built her life around morph into the architects of her misery. But what she didn't know was that the worst betrayal was still crawling toward her, quiet, cold, and merciless. The day Mama Uche demanded that Amara pay Somedina's university fees was more than just a request. It was a test of loyalty in their eyes. When Amara politely explained that business had been slow and that she didn't have that kind of money at the moment, it was as though she had committed an unforgivable crime. "Lie. You are a liar, Amara. You are hiding money. You just hate this family," Mama Uche thundered, stomping her foot as though trying to shake the earth itself. Her sisters-in-law joined the chorus immediately, shouting accusations in turns. "Did we not tell you? This woman is fake, acting like a saint all this while. Wicked soul." Chidinma spat, arms folded across her chest. Ngozi wasn't any better. Imagine. Feeding her husband's family was never her plan. She trapped him with marriage, but now her true colors are out. The words stung. They weren't just insults. They were daggers aimed straight at Amara's dignity, chipping away everything she had tried to build with love and kindness. When Uche arrived that evening, Amara thought he would at least listen, maybe even mediate. But the look on his face told her otherwise. His eyes were dark with something unfamiliar, coldness, resentment, and a cruel distance she couldn't comprehend. Before she could explain, his mother had already pulled him aside, whispering rapidly, fanning the flames that had already engulfed their home. When Uche finally turned to face her, it wasn't with the eyes of a husband, but those of a man who now saw his wife as the enemy. So it's true, Amara. You're hiding money? You can't help my brother, but you've been feeding outsiders? You're a disgrace. You've been pretending all this time, he barked. Amara tried to speak, but her words trembled. Uche, please listen. The shop is suffering. But he cut her off, slamming his palm on the table, so hard the plates rattled. Don't explain anything. You've shown your true colors. And with that, he stormed out, leaving her standing in silence, broken, stunned, and questioning where everything had gone so wrong. The days that followed were unbearable. Uche stopped coming home some nights. When he did, he barely acknowledged her existence. He refused her meals, slept on the couch, and spoke only when necessary. And even then, it was to complain or accuse. His family's visits became more frequent and more hostile. They walked in and out of the house and the shop like they owned it, refusing to greet Amara, deliberately knocking things over, or loudly gossiping about her in her presence. It wasn't just physical exhaustion that weighed Amara down anymore. It was the mental suffocation, the realization that the man she built her life around was no longer hers. Her home was no longer a home. It was a prison, where her love was twisted into a weapon against her. The storm she thought would pass had only just begun. What made the pain cut even deeper was that Uche was not always like this. There was a time, not long ago, when he would rush home with a smile, carry her in his arms just because, and call her his blessing from God. But now, that man seemed dead, replaced by someone who couldn't even look her in the eye without sneering. The poison his family had planted was no longer growing. It was blooming, vines of resentment choking every corner of their marriage. It started with silent treatments, ignoring her greetings, skipping meals, and leaving home at odd hours without explanation. Then it escalated to throwing her things around, refusing to give her money for household needs, and sometimes muttering cruel words under his breath as if she weren't even there. Uche had become a stranger, not just to her, but to the very vows he once swore before witnesses. One evening, as Amara prepared a simple meal of yam porridge, she overheard Uche on the phone in the bedroom. His voice was low but sharp. That woman is the worst mistake I ever made. She's selfish, stingy, and heartless. She has money, but pretends she doesn't. If not for my family, I would have left her a long time ago, he spat. His words echoed like thunder inside Amara's chest. Her hands trembled so hard that the knife slipped from her grip, cutting her palm slightly. She pressed it against her wrapper, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the bleeding inside her heart. That night, she didn't confront him. What was there to say? What do you say when the man you love confesses he regrets ever choosing you? Her appetite vanished. She sat quietly in the corner of her shop long after closing hours, staring at nothing, wondering how love could decay into something so venomous. As days turned to weeks, the gossip in the neighborhood grew louder. Mama Uche had made it her mission to spread the narrative that Amara was a wicked, heartless wife who refused to support her husband's family. She's been eating alone, Mama Uche told anyone who cared to listen. She pretended to love my son. She trapped him, but God will expose her. Even some customers began to look at Amara differently. Some stopped coming to the shop altogether, afraid of being caught in the crossfire of a brewing family war. Others came not to buy, but to gather gossip like dry firewood for their evening discussions. Amara felt her world collapsing, not just inside her home, but around her business too. The very foundation she had worked years to build. The walls were closing in. And worst of all, the man she had sacrificed for, defended, and loved was now leading the mob with the torch. The full collapse didn't happen in a single moment. It was a slow, cruel erosion of everything Amara thought was solid. Nights became longer. Uche started locking the bedroom door, forcing Amara to sleep on the worn-out sofa in the sitting room. The house that once echoed with laughter now echoed with silence, broken only by the muffled insults from Uche's phone conversations with friends or family. He wasn't just cold, he was cruel. Amara often caught him watching her with a glare that carried disgust, as if she were a burden he couldn't wait to discard. The emotional torture became unbearable. He would deliberately come home with bags of food, feed himself, and leave her hungry, watching to see if she'd beg. But Amara, with whatever dignity she had left, refused to stoop to that level. She cooked with whatever scraps she could salvage and quietly endured. Then came the ultimate betrayal. One morning, while sweeping the compound, Amara overheard the most painful conversation yet. Uche was standing outside with his friend, laughing, completely unaware that she could hear. "That child? A beg, I don't even know if it's mine," Uche sneered. "She day lie. Nah, sharp girl. I no sure say nah me day responsible for that bell. She's been moving around too much. Who knows?" His friend laughed. "Omo, you better deny, fasto. Before she rope you. Deny her for public, make everybody know say no be your own." The laughter that followed was like a blade slicing through Amara's heart. Her knees buckled, and she dropped the broom. For a moment, the world spun around her. How could the same man she once sheltered from the rain now humiliate her like this? How did love rot into this level of wickedness? From that day on, Amara withdrew completely, not out of weakness, but as a shield. She barely spoke unless necessary. She focused on keeping herself together for the sake of the child growing inside her. The child who was now being denied before even entering the world. She cried silently at night, sometimes muffling her sobs with a pillow to avoid Uche hearing and deriving satisfaction from her pain. But deep within, something else began to awaken, a quiet fire, a stubborn whisper that said, "This is not how your story will end." She didn't know how, and she didn't know when, but somehow, the same God who watched her feed this man when he was hungry was watching. The tables would turn. One day, Amara had always imagined that when she became pregnant, it would be one of the happiest seasons of her life. She pictured waking Uche up with the news, both of them laughing and crying together, imagining names, holding her belly together, and counting the months in excitement. But reality was cruel. The day the pregnancy test confirmed it, her hands trembled, not with joy, but with fear. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her lips quivered as her palm gently caressed her small but growing bump. Would this child finally heal the wounds between them? Would this be the bridge that would remind Uche of their love? Her foolish heart still hoped. But deep inside, a louder voice whispered, "Prepare yourself, things might get worse." When she told him the news, Uche didn't smile, didn't flinch. His face was a mask of stone. For a long minute, he said nothing, just stared at her belly, as though it were something cursed. Then he scoffed, chuckled bitterly, and spat out the words Amara would never forget. "Pregnant? Are you sure I'm the father?" Her world shattered. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her vision blurred with hot tears. "Uche, what are you saying? How can you even think that?" she stammered, her voice shaking. He rose from the chair, brushing past her like she was invisible. "Don't come near me with this nonsense. Go and meet whoever owns that thing," he muttered, grabbing his phone and storming out. The sound of the gate slamming was the sound of her heart splitting wide open. The following weeks were hell. Uche barely came home, and when he did, it was only to hurl insults. "Witch. Pretender. Now your secrets are coming out," he shouted one evening as neighbors peeked through their windows. His family cheered him on. Mama Uche came around regularly, rubbing her hands dramatically over her chest, declaring to anyone who would listen that Amara was a disgrace to womanhood. "She trapped my son, but the gods have exposed her," she declared. Even the sisters chimed in, spreading rumors that Amara had been secretly seeing men, a lie so painful that Amara sometimes wondered if her heart could survive another sunrise. But survive she did, not for herself anymore, but for the tiny life growing inside her. Her belly was growing, but her strength was withering. Food tasted like sand, her body ached, but she pressed on. She had no choice. By the 8th month of her pregnancy, Amara's body was too heavy, and her mind too fragile to bear the weight of everything crumbling around her. Her legs swelled like logs, her hands were numb most mornings, and sharp pains frequently stabbed her back. Yet, through all this, Uche offered not a drop of care, not a single question about her welfare. The day her water started leaking slightly, a false alarm the nurse said was common near term, she panicked and rushed to the nearest general hospital. Alone, exhausted. But when the contractions began to tighten across her lower abdomen later that week, she knew she couldn't handle it on her own anymore. Despite the humiliation, despite the risk of more insults, she picked up her phone, trembling, and called Uche. "Please, just help me get to the hospital. I beg you," she whispered. When Uche arrived at the hospital, for a fleeting second, Amara thought maybe, just maybe, he would soften seeing her in this condition. But no. The moment he stepped through the entrance and saw her, his face twisted into pure malice. He didn't even wait for her to finish explaining before shouting loud enough for everyone to hear. This woman is not my wife. You people should not call me here again. Oh, I don't know her. And that child is not mine." His voice was like a gunshot. Heads turned instantly. Nurses froze. Mothers breastfeeding their babies looked up in shock. Passers-by paused mid-stride. Amara stood there, mouth ajar, unable to move, as though the ground had opened to swallow her. She shook her head slowly, murmuring, "Uche, please stop, not here, not like this." But Uche wasn't done. He raised his hands like someone washing his hands off dirt. Let her carry her shame alone. I don't know her. Her knees buckled as the tears came like a river. She staggered, one hand clutching her belly, as if trying to protect her unborn child from the hate. Her back hit the cold wall of the hospital, and she slowly slid down, sobbing, gasping for air, as the whispers grew louder around her. Some shook their heads in disappointment. Others pointed. "You see these girls of nowadays, always trapping men," someone murmured. Another responded, "No. Look at her. That man is wicked. Even if the child wasn't his, is this the way?" But it didn't matter. The damage was done. Uche stormed out of the hospital, leaving behind not just a broken woman, but a spectacle, a humiliation that would echo in Amara's mind for years. She buried her face in her hands, whispering to her baby, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But what neither she nor Uche knew was that someone else was watching, someone who had seen enough. The shiny black Range Rover parked under the shade had been there for a while. Its tinted windows concealed the man inside, a man whose clenched fists trembled, not with fear, but with rage barely contained. Mr. Obinna watched every second of the horror that unfolded in front of the hospital. His chest rose and fell heavily, his jaw locked tight, and his heart pounded not just with empathy, but with a deeply personal fury. His driver, seated at the front, glanced nervously at the rearview mirror, unsure of whether to say something. But before he could, Mr. Obinna opened the door himself and stepped out. He adjusted his sunglasses, straightened the sleeves of his expensive tailored kaftan, and walked toward the broken woman sitting on the floor like discarded trash. As he approached, the atmosphere shifted. The gossiping voices faded into silence. People stepped aside, staring, partly because of his commanding presence, partly because of the sheer confusion. What business did a man like this, obviously rich, powerful, and important, have with a woman like that? Amara didn't even notice his shadow until his shoes appeared directly in front of her. Slowly, her teary eyes looked up, her breath hitched when their gazes met. His expression wasn't that of pity. No, it was something more profound. It was controlled anger wrapped in gentleness. Without saying a word, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a clean white handkerchief, and knelt to her level. "Wipe your tears," he said softly but firmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority that made the crowd step even further back. Amara's lips quivered. For a second, she hesitated, unsure whether to accept or brace for more humiliation. But there was something about this man, a softness in his gaze that felt safe. Slowly, she reached out, took the handkerchief with shaky fingers, and dabbed her face. Mr. Obinna stood and extended his hand. "Come. You don't belong on the floor," he said. His voice was gentle, but left no room for argument. Amara hesitated again, but then allowed him to help her up. As she rose, holding her belly with one hand and his firm grip with the other, the billionaire turned to the onlookers, scanned the crowd coldly, and in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he said, "From today, anyone who mocks this woman mocks me. Let it be known." Gasps echoed. The same mouths that whispered gossip now hung open in stunned silence. The tables had begun to turn. The moment Mr. Obinna opened the door of his luxury SUV and gestured for Amara to enter, her legs froze. Her mind was torn between confusion, gratitude, and the lingering fear of yet another betrayal. Who was this man? Why was he helping her? Would this be another trap disguised as kindness? But one look at his face, steady, calm, and filled with quiet reassurance, and her body moved before her brain could protest. She climbed in slowly, one hand cradling her belly. The seats were softer than anything she had ever sat on, her fingers sinking into the fine leather. The air conditioning kissed her sweat-streaked face, offering a comfort so foreign that it felt surreal. As the door closed behind her, the outside noise, the judgment, the whispers, the shame, disappeared like a nightmare fading at dawn. For the first few minutes, silence filled the car. Amara held her hands together, wringing them anxiously while stealing quick glances at the man beside her. Mr. Obinna didn't speak immediately. Instead, he observed her, the way her eyes darted around nervously, the way her shoulders were still tense, as though bracing for another blow from life. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his own memories, he finally spoke. "Tell me, what's your story? How did it come to this?" His voice wasn't demanding. It was gentle but firm, the kind of voice that tells you it's safe to pour out your soul. And so, between shaky breaths and broken sobs, Amara began to speak. Her words flowed, starting from her humble beginnings, to how she built her business, how she met Uche, how love turned into poison, and how the very people she fed now fed off her pain. As she spoke, Mr. Obinna's face shifted from sympathy to something darker, rage buried beneath control. He clenched his fists as he listened, remembering his own mother's cries decades ago, when she was dragged through the same mud of humiliation. His own father had denied them both, leaving his mother to fend for herself with a child clinging to her wrapper. That experience shaped him, turned him into the relentless billionaire he was today, but the scars never left. Now, watching Amara relive the same nightmare his mother once endured ignited a fire in him. "You will never be alone again," he said quietly, but with a finality that didn't require confirmation. He tapped his driver's shoulder. "Head to Sunrise Apartments. Get the top floor ready." The car shifted gears smoothly as they pulled away from the hospital, leaving behind the whispers, the shame, and the man who had just written himself out of her future without knowing it. As the car glided through the streets, Mr. Obinna's thoughts drifted, uninvited, back to the haunting images of his childhood. He remembered being no older than 7 when his father stood in front of the church elders and spat the words that would shape Obinna's entire life. "That woman is nothing to me. That child is not mine." His mother had fallen to her knees, clutching him, sobbing not just from pain, but from the sheer disbelief that the man she loved could deny them so viciously. The murmurs, the stares, the way neighbors shook their heads, it was all burned into his memory like a scar branded on his soul. From that day forward, his mother became both mother and father. She toiled under the sun, selling roasted corn by the roadside, cleaning homes, washing clothes, doing whatever it took to feed him and send him to school. Obinna remembered the nights they slept hungry, the days when his mother would pretend to have a stomachache so that the little food they had could be left for him. He remembered sitting on the dusty floor of classrooms with torn sandals, but he also remembered her unwavering determination. "No one will mock you, Obinna. No one will laugh at you. One day you will rise so high that those who mocked us will choke on their pride," she used to whisper while braiding his hair at night. And true to her words, Obinna rose, from street corners to lecture halls, from menial jobs to corporate offices, until he became one of the most powerful, yet silent, billionaires in the country. But no amount of money ever truly erased the ghost of that rejection. That's why he had always preferred to live quietly, avoiding the spotlight, investing in anonymous charities, and helping women like his mother. Women the world tried to break. Looking at Amara now, broken yet still holding herself together with invisible threads of strength, Obinna felt a familiar ache. It wasn't just pity. It was personal. Life has a cruel way of repeating itself, he muttered. He couldn't save his mother back then, but he could do something now. His eyes shifted from the window back to her, studying her swollen belly, the way her fingers trembled, the flicker of pain hiding behind her lowered eyelashes. He reached over, not in a romantic gesture, but with the kind of protective instinct a lion feels toward an injured cub. Amara, he said softly but firmly, you've suffered enough. That ends today. Her lips parted in shock. For the first time in weeks, no months, a tear fell from her eye that wasn't born of pain, but of a fragile, tentative hope. Word travels fast, faster than wildfire, especially when gossip is the fuel. It didn't take long for the news to reach Mama Uche's compound that something had shifted. One of the market women, half crazed with curiosity and half fueled by her love for drama, was the first to spread it. Wanna know here? After Uche disgraced that his wife for hospital, a big man carry him comet. Not Billionaire, Range Rover with escort o. The news exploded like a bomb. Mama Uche's eyes widened, her wrapper nearly slipping from her chest as she gasped. Billionaire, she repeated as if the word itself could strangle her. Chidinma and Ngozi stared at each other, their faces draining of color. So Medina, the lazy brother, threw down his game controller, suddenly wide awake. The entire household trembled not out of guilt, but out of fear that the useless wife they once mocked might now be standing on higher ground. By evening, the family assembled like panicked rats realizing the flood was coming. Mama Uche paced the dusty floor muttering, No, we need to go and apologize. Yes. Tell her it was all misunderstanding. Tell her that we are still family. And that's it. Before she forgets herself and starts doing madam for us. The sisters nodded quickly. Yes, Mama. In fact, we should cry. Let's kneel. Let's make it look like we are sorry. Then she will pity us and help us. So Medina chimed in and asked her to pay for my school again. She will accept now that she has Billionaire backup. None of them mentioned the actual pain they had caused. None of them acknowledged their guilt. It was not remorse. It was desperation wrapped in fake apologies. Early the next morning, dressed in their most pitiful outfits, faces greased with fake tears, Mama Uche and her children marched toward Sunrise Apartments. But what they didn't know was that the woman they were about to meet was no longer the same Amara they had bullied, mocked, and reduced to nothing. They were about to face a version of her they had never met, one who had been broken, yes, but was no longer bendable. And waiting behind the polished glass doors wasn't just Amara, but Mr. Obinna, whose quiet fury was far more dangerous than any slap or insult they had ever thrown. The leeches were coming back, but this time the blood they sought wouldn't flow so easily. The following morning arrived with an eerie quietness. The tall, glassy Sunrise Apartments stood as a symbol of everything Uche's family secretly hated: wealth, status, and power that wasn't theirs. As they approached the entrance, the security men stationed at the gate eyed them curiously. Mama Uche led the parade, adjusting her wrapper repeatedly as if the fabric itself could disguise her shame. Behind her, Chidinma and Ngozi wore faces that danced between false humility and veiled entitlement. So Medina followed lazily, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes scanning the environment as if already mentally pricing the cars parked in the compound. When they reached the main reception, one of the security guards intercepted them. Good morning. Who are you here to see? He asked, professional but firm. Mama Uche quickly switched to her theatrical tone. My daughter. Our wife. Her name is Amara. She's inside. Tell her her family is here to see her, she said, her voice cracking, pretending to cry. The guard raised an eyebrow. Are you sure she's expecting you? Before Mama Uche could respond, the lobby elevator dinged open. Out stepped Mr. Obinna himself, dressed in a crisp white kaftan that screamed power and elegance. His eyes swept over the group like one would look at pests invading their home. The entire family froze, realizing instantly who he was. The billionaire whose name had set the market ablaze with gossip just yesterday. He said nothing for a moment, just stared. His silence was louder than any insult. Then, slowly, he tilted his head, letting out a cold, humorless smile. "Oh, look who found their way here," he said. Suddenly, family matters again. The discomfort was instant. Mama Uche stammered, folding her hands awkwardly in front of her chest. No, sir, you misunderstand. We are just here to check on our daughter. Family is family," she fumbled. Her daughters quickly nodded like trained parrots. Yes, sir. Small misunderstanding, but blood is thicker than water," Ngozi added. So Medina, useless as ever, offered a lazy grin, completely oblivious to the brewing tension. Mr. Obinna folded his arms, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Blood, is it? Where was blood when you threw her out? Where was family when you told everyone she was a disgrace?" His gaze hardened. "I suggest you go back home. The door you used to walk over her is permanently closed now." The security guard, sensing the silent command, stepped closer. "Sir, should I?" But Obinna raised his hand. "Not yet. Let them stand there and understand that this is what it looks like when karma pays a visit." The air shifted. Mama Uche, sensing the tension tightening like a noose, did what she knew best. She collapsed dramatically on the floor, clutching her chest as if her heart was about to give way. "Ah, Obinna, you want to kill me. My chest. My heart," she wailed, rolling side to side. Her daughters gasped theatrically, bending to revive her with pats on the back that looked more rehearsed than genuine. So Medina, useless as always, stood behind them with a goofy smirk, muttering under his breath, "This one na film o." But Mr. Obinna didn't flinch. His arms remained folded across his chest, his eyes cold, unmoved. The security guards were barely holding back laughter as the drama unfolded in front of them. It wasn't the first time they'd seen entitled people try to fake humility in front of wealth. But this was on another level entirely. Obinna finally spoke, his voice slicing through the chaos. "Madam, stop embarrassing yourself. Your acting is terrible," he said with a dry chuckle. His gaze flicked to Amara, who had quietly walked down the staircase moments earlier, her rounded belly leading, her face a mixture of disbelief and sadness. Seeing them again made her heart race, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity that after everything, they could still show their faces. Obinna stepped aside, letting Amara come forward if she chose. She took a breath, straightened her back, and walked up to them. Not the broken, sobbing woman from the hospital, but a woman who had found pieces of herself again. "What do you want?" she asked simply, her voice steady. Mama Uche, snapping back into her role, scrambled to her knees. "Amara, my daughter, forgive us. We were blinded by anger, by confusion," she sniffed, crawling toward Amara's feet. "Family fights, but family always comes back together," Ngozi chimed in, her eyes darting between Amara's face and Obinna's expression, trying to gauge which side the wind was blowing. Chidinma joined. We know we made mistakes, but please come back home. Uche regrets everything." Amara looked down at them, feeling the sting of every memory, the hunger, the insults, the nights spent crying while they laughed in her face. Her lips tightened. "Go home. The Amara you once mocked doesn't live at that address anymore." Her voice was like steel wrapped in silk, calm, yet unbreakable. Obinna nodded approvingly beside her, folding his hands. "I suggest you leave before I make that an order," he added, sending them scrambling to their feet. By the time Mama Uche and her children staggered back home, the neighborhood was already buzzing with whispers and side eyes. News travels fast, and the streets were merciless when it came to public disgrace. The same women who once giggled with them, who once believed every nasty thing they spread about Amara, now stood in front of their compounds shaking their heads. "Ihia, you see life? No be this same family way say that girl no go ever make am," one woman murmured loud enough for them to hear. Another chimed in, "God has a way of disgracing the wicked." Mama Uche couldn't respond. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. Her wrapper, stained from kneeling earlier, flapped loosely against her chest as she stumbled inside, defeated. Uche himself was not spared. When he arrived at work that day, thinking life would continue as usual, he was called into the manager's office. Sitting there were 2 board members and the HR officer. On the desk was a printed copy of a viral post making rounds on social media. Someone had secretly filmed his public denial of Amara at the hospital. The video was everywhere. His face, his voice, his wicked words. Comments flooded in, wicked husband. Heartless man. Is this the kind of man you employ? Sponsors were threatening to pull contracts. Clients were boycotting. The HR officer didn't even sugarcoat it. Mr. Uche, we cannot have someone like you associated with this company. Your services are no longer needed. Uche blinked rapidly, trying to speak, but no words came. Fired. Just like that. But karma wasn't finished. Landlords who once smiled at Uche now frowned. Creditors knocked at the door he couldn't answer. The same friends he once bragged to about teaching Amara a lesson suddenly stopped picking his calls. Even so, Medina's own friends mocked him now, whispering that his family had lost their only source of survival. Mama Uche, who once strutted through the market insulting others, could now barely show her face. Her debts piled as sellers refused to give her food on credit. Her loud voice, once the terror of the street, was reduced to a whisper. Meanwhile, as the sun set on their misery, another sun was rising elsewhere, on Amara. Her days of tears were giving way to something new. And in the quiet corners of her new home, surrounded by peace for the first time in years, she whispered to herself, God, thank you for not forgetting me. For the first time in months, Amara woke up in a room that smelled of peace rather than pain. The luxury apartment Mr. Obina had set her up in was nothing short of paradise compared to where she had come from. The bed was soft, the curtains were thick, the walls were soundproofed against the noise of the city, and for once she wasn't waking up to the harsh whispers of insults or the loud banging of entitled in-laws. The nurse stationed to assist her, employed by Obina, came in every morning with a warm smile, checking her vitals, preparing her breakfast, and reminding her, "You are safe now, Madam Amara." Those words had become like balm to her soul. She would often sit by the large glass window, staring out at the city skyline, hands cradling her round belly, whispering to the child growing inside her, "You won't suffer. I swear. You will never know the pain I have known." With Obina's support, her life began to quietly reconstruct itself. Her shop, which had been stripped bare by Uche's family, was revived, not just revived, but expanded. Obina had sent his legal team to quietly purchase the empty shop lot next to hers. With new shelves, more goods, and even a delivery van, Amara's business was transformed into one of the largest food supply stores in the area. Customers who had once avoided her because of rumors now lined up, embarrassed, hoping she would serve them. Some apologized openly. Others tried to pretend like nothing happened. But Amara's heart had changed. She no longer gave energy to the whispers of the streets. Her focus was now on her child, her peace, and her future. Uche and his family were no longer her problem. Life had handled them in a way no words ever could. Obina was more than just a helper. He became her shield, her silent guardian. Whenever she needed something, medical checkups, legal advice, or even emotional support, he was there. Not overbearing, not demanding anything in return, but simply present in a way Amara had never experienced before. Sometimes she caught herself wondering why a man of his status would care so much. And each time, Obina would remind her, not through words but through actions, that some people help not because of what they gain, but because of the pain they understand. On one quiet evening, as they sat on the balcony drinking warm tea, Obina looked at her and said, "Amara, when life tried to break my mother, no one helped her. I was too young then. But today, God gave me a chance to do for you what I wish someone had done for her." Amara didn't respond immediately. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. For the first time in a very long time, she felt seen, truly seen. The labor started around 2 a.m., sharp and sudden. Amara woke with a jolt as a pain, so deep it felt like her body was splitting in two, surged through her lower abdomen. At first, she thought it was just one of those false contractions she'd been having for weeks. But when the next wave came, sharper, longer, and followed by a warm gush of water, reality set in. "It's time," she gasped, holding her belly. Her scream woke the nurse, who rushed into the room, checking her vitals with practiced hands. "Madam, it's time. Let's go." "Don't panic," the nurse assured, dialing Mr. Obinna immediately. Within 15 minutes, Obinna himself arrived, half-dressed, eyes wide but focused. He held Amara's hand as they guided her into the waiting SUV, sirens blaring as his private driver sped toward the private hospital he had reserved just for her delivery. At the hospital, a team of specialists awaited. The contractions became relentless, each one pulling a cry from Amara's lips, each one demanding more strength than she thought she possessed. Yet through it all, Obinna remained, never leaving the waiting room, pacing back and forth, fists clenched, lips whispering prayers he hadn't said in years. Nurses moved in and out, updating him. "She's strong, but it's a tough one." "She's fighting," one said. As hours passed, his mind flashed back to his mother, how she fought alone. The thought fueled him. He vowed silently, "Never again will a woman fight alone if I can help it." Inside the delivery room, Amara gritted her teeth, pushing with everything in her. Sweat soaked her body, but her mind focused on one thing. This child must live. This child must know love. At exactly 5:16 a.m., the cry of a newborn filled the air. A healthy baby boy, strong lungs, beautiful skin like his mother's, fists clenched like a warrior born. The doctor smiled as he cleaned the child and placed him in Amara's trembling arms. Tears flowed freely down her face as she cradled him, whispering, "Welcome, my son. My miracle. My reason to live." Minutes later, the nurse wheeled her out to the waiting area where Obinna stood. The moment their eyes met, her tired but victorious, him anxious but relieved, something unspoken passed between them. The nurse carefully placed the baby into Obinna's arms, and for a moment, the billionaire who had conquered boardrooms, outsmarted tycoons, and led empires trembled. His hand shook slightly as he held the tiny boy, but his eyes softened, and a slow smile spread across his face. "This child," he said quietly but firmly, "will never lack. Not while I breathe." The story closed not with pain, but with the sound of new life, a reminder that though the storms come, the sun always rises again. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.